Since her talk with Ally, she had felt sure that Harney was engaged to Annabel Balch, and that the process of "settling things" would involve the breaking of this tie. Her first rage of jealousy over, she felt no fear on this score. She was still sure that Harney would come back, and she was equally sure that, for the moment at least, it was she whom he loved, and not Miss Balch. Yet the girl, no less, remained a rival, since she represented all the things that Charity felt herself most incapable of understanding or achieving. Annabel Balch was, if not the girl Harney ought to marry, at least the kind of girl it would be natural for him to marry. Charity had never been able to picture herself as his wife, had never been able to arrest the vision and follow it out in its daily consequences, but she could perfectly imagine Annabel Balch in that relation to him. The more she thought of these things, the more the sense of fatality weighed on her. She felt the uselessness of struggling against the circumstances. She had never known how to adapt herself. She could only break and tear and destroy. The scene with Ally had left her stricken with shame at her own childish savagery. What would Harney have thought if he had witnessed it? But when she turned the incident over in her puzzled mind, she could not imagine what a civilized person would have done in her place. She felt herself too unequally pitted against unknown forces. At length this feeling moved her to sudden action. She took a sheet of letter paper from Mr. Royal's office, and sitting by the kitchen lamp, one night after Verena had gone to bed, began her first letter to Harney. It was very short. "I want you should marry Annabel Balch if you promise to. I think maybe you were afraid I'd feel too bad about it. I feel I'd rather you acted right. Your loving Charity." She posted the letter early the next morning, and for a few days her heart felt strangely light. Then she began to wonder why she received no answer. One day, as she sat alone in the library, pondering these things, the walls of books began to spin around her, and the rosewood desk to rock under her elbows. The dizziness was followed by a wave of nausea like she had felt on the day of the exercises in the town hall. But the town hall had been crowded and stiflingly hot, and the library was empty and so chilly that she had kept on her jacket. 5 minutes before she had felt perfectly well, and now it seemed as if she were going to die. The bit of lace at which she still languidly worked dropped from her fingers, and the steel crochet hook clattered to the floor. She pressed her temples hard between her damp hands, steadying herself against the desk, while a wave of sickness swept over her. Little by little it subsided, and after a few minutes she stood up, shaken and terrified, groped for her hat, and stumbled out into the air. But the whole sunlit autumn whirled, reeled, and roared around her, as she dragged herself along the interminable length of the road home. As she approached the red house, she saw a buggy standing at the door, and her heart gave a leap. But it was only Mr. Royal who got out, his travelling bag in hand. He saw her coming, and waited in the porch. She was conscious that he was looking at her intently, as if there was something strange in her appearance, and she threw back her head with a desperate effort at ease. Their eyes met, and she said, "You back?" as if nothing had happened, and he answered, "Yes, I'm back," and walked in ahead of her, pushing open the door of his office. She climbed to her room, every step of the stairs holding her fast as if her feet were lined with glue. 2 days later she descended from the train at Nettleton and walked out of the station into the dusty square. The brief interval of cold weather was over, and the day was as soft and almost as hot as when she and Harney had emerged on the same scene on the 4th of July. In the square the same broken-down hacks and carryalls stood drawn up in a despondent line, and the lank horses with fly-nets over their withers swayed their heads drearily to and fro. She recognized the staring signs over the eating-houses and billiard-saloons, and the long lines of wires on lofty poles tapering down the main street to the park at its other end. Taking the way the wires pointed, she went on hastily with bent head, till she reached a wide transverse street with a brick building at the corner. She crossed this street and glanced furtively up at the front of the brick building. and entered a door opening on a flight of steep, brass-rimmed stairs. On the second landing she rang a bell, and a mulatto girl with a bushy head and a frilled apron led her into a hall where a stuffed fox on its hind legs proffered a brass card-tray to visitors. At the back of the hall was a glazed door marked "Office." After waiting a few minutes in a handsomely furnished room, with plush sofas surmounted by large gold-framed photographs of showy young women, Charity was shown into the office. When she came out of the glazed door, Dr. Merkel followed and led her into another room, smaller and still more crowded with plush and gold frames. Dr. Merkel was a plump woman with small, bright eyes, an immense mass of black hair coming down low on her forehead, and unnaturally white and even teeth. She wore a rich black dress, with gold chains and charms hanging from her bosom. Her hands were large and smooth, and quick in all their movements, and she smelt of musk and carbolic acid. She smiled on Charity with all her faultless teeth. "Sit down, my dear. Wouldn't you like a little drop of something to pick you up? No? Well, just lay back a minute, then. There's nothing to be done just yet, but in about a month, if you'll step round again, I could take you right into my own house for 2 or 3 days, and there wouldn't be a mite of trouble. Mercy me! The next time you'll know better'n to fret like this." Charity gazed at her with widening eyes. This woman with the false hair, the false teeth, the false murderous smile. What was she offering her but immunity from some unthinkable crime? Charity, till then, had been conscious only of a vague self-disgust and a frightening physical distress. Now, of a sudden, there came to her the grave surprise of motherhood. She had come to this dreadful place because she knew of no other way of making sure that she was not mistaken about her state, and the woman had taken her for a miserable creature like Julia. The thought was so horrible that she sprang up, white and shaking, one of her great rushes of anger sweeping over her. Dr. Merkel, still smiling, also rose. "Why do you run off in such a hurry? You can stretch out right here on my sofa." She paused, and her smile grew more motherly. "Afterwards, if there's been any talk at home and you want to get away for a while, I have a lady friend in Boston who's looking for a companion. You're the very one to suit her, my dear." Charity had reached the door. "I don't want to stay. I don't want to come back here," she stammered, her hand on the knob, but with a swift movement Dr. Merkel edged her from the threshold. "Oh, very well. $5, please." Charity looked helplessly at the doctor's tight lips and rigid face. Her last savings had gone in repaying Ally for the cost of Miss Balch's ruined blouse, and she had had to borrow $4 from her friend to pay for her railway ticket and cover the doctor's fee. It had never occurred to her that medical advice could cost more than $2. "I didn't know. I haven't got that much," she faltered, bursting into tears. Dr. Merkel gave a short laugh, which did not show her teeth, and inquired with concision if Charity supposed she ran the establishment for her own amusement. She leaned her firm shoulders against the door as she spoke, like a grim jailer making terms with her captive. "You say you'll come round and settle later? I've heard that pretty often, too. Give me your address, and if you can't pay me, I'll send the bill to your folks." "What? I can't understand what you say. That don't suit you either? My, you're pretty particular for a girl that ain't got enough to settle her own bills." She paused, and fixed her eyes on the brooch with the blue stone that Charity had pinned to her blouse. "Ain't you ashamed to talk that way to a lady that's got to earn her living, when you go about with jewelry like that on you? It ain't in my line, and I do it only as a favour, but if you're a mind to leave that brooch as a pledge, I don't say no. Yes, of course you can get it back when you bring me my money." On the way home she felt an immense and unexpected quietude. It had been horrible to have to leave Harney's gift in the woman's hands, but even at that price the news she brought away had not been too dearly bought. She sat with half-closed eyes as the train rushed through the familiar landscape, and now the memories of her former journey, instead of flying before her like dead leaves, seemed to be ripening in her blood like sleeping grain. She would never again know what it was to feel herself alone. Everything seemed to have grown suddenly clear and simple. she no longer had any difficulty in picturing her